I don't have a song today, ladies and gentlemen, but we are back here. Let's lie for another episode of Relationship Topia. I am your co-host, Dr. Trail Ravenel, and I have your co-host, Jill Speaks Truth, and we are ready to dive into another conversation about relationships. So you all know this podcast. I feel like I have my radio voice on. This is all about relationships, right? Relationships with yourself, relationship with God, yourself, and others. All three very important to live a life that is whole, fulfilled, and that's thriving. So tonight we have a juicy, juicy conversation, or today, this afternoon, whatever it is where you are. And we're talking about sabotage. How individuals, both men and women, we're not going to be biased on tonight and one sided, how you sabotage your relationships. So, Jill is going to kick off and we're going to get right into it unless you want to say anything else about that, Jill. And I guess
Well, I just
technically it
want
will
to
be
say,
right.
yeah. What I find is I feel like a lot of people in their relationships over things, matters, and issues that can be resolved. We often quote the John Gottman study, which I used to get very discouraged about, which says that 67%, is it 67, sis?
59.
Or 69?
Yeah.
69% of marriage, and I would just say relationship issues are what they consider perpetual, which means they're always there. And what I feel like a lot of times when we realize that we have issues that's perpetual, we get discouraged and say this issue is never going to be resolved. And won't, but it can be managed. And so
Mhm.
today we want to just kind of like think about in a relationship, each person gets to take 100% responsibility of the results that they're achieving in that relationship and their part in that relationship. I don't know what just happened.
You went sideways. Yeah, you went sideways. Oh, goodness. Well,
I
you were
went
saying that each person
sideways.
each person gets to take part. You know, they say like it takes one person to destroy a marriage, but it takes two people to build it up, or it takes one person to destroy a relationship, but it takes two people to work on that relationship to make that relationship work. That's what I heard.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I've had heard and seen one person do it, but it is a lot of
Woo.
stress. And a lot of times that one person, eventually you have to somehow influence the other person to come on board eventually. And that could take a lot of time, years sometimes, for somebody to quote unquote come around. And most people don't have the capacity, patience, and wherewithal to do that. So what I just want to encourage you guys is like, in this moment, let's start taking ownership of our relationships and stop focusing on what the other person is doing. We do this all the time. Like everybody does this. I've been guilty of this, but we're so easy to say, oh, this person's not doing this. But we want to talk about what you are doing or not doing that is driving them to do or not do what you need them to do. And so if we are taking ownership of ourselves, we can really make more stride versus focusing on what the other person is not doing. So the first thing, this whole part is going to be a 3-part series. And the first part, this segment tonight, is going to be on communication. So with that, we want to talk about the avoidance of emotional conversation. Like, I don't know what happens sometimes in relationships, but sometimes in relationships, guess what we forget to do? We forget to be in relationship. Part of being in a relationship, a big part of being in a relationship
You
is
get to remember.
communication. A big part of, come on. You get to talk to that person. Y'all remember when you used to be in high school, college, or whatever? Oh, I'm talking to such and such, meaning you're having conversation, you having dialogue. You want to get to the place, I like to say, you're talking about everything and nothing. This is talking about what's the politics of the day, talking about your challenges of your day, some of the things that you struggle with in work, some of the things that you thrive in work, talking about your vision, talking about your dreams, talking about aspiration, talking about things that's going on with you, talking about how certain things made you feel, what somebody did or say, and how that made you feel. We got to start having these conversations. I feel like we have, because we don't really, sometimes we are so business minded. We get such in the mechanics, especially when you have children, especially when you've been married for a long time. It's so easy to say, okay, you already paid the mortgage, you already paid the water bill, you already took out the trash, and get into these functional roles and assignments and forget to say, babe, how was your day? Oh my God, you look so amazing. Like, let's talk about, how do you feel? You had a hard day. Like, let's talk about our feelings. Like, that's a deeper level of connection. Like I said, the politics, all the other things are nice and fun. And hopefully if you have common views around that, you can have some great conversation and dialogue, but you want to go a little deeper and talk about each other's feelings towards it. Even when it comes to politics, like you can talk about, okay, what's happening and how does that make me feel? So that's what I really want to drive home, is we can no longer avoid those conversations, because this is intimacy. Communication is intimacy. And so a lot of guys complain, with all due respect, my fellas, that the woman is withholding intimacy, withholding the physical aspects of the relationship. But what I found in most cases that I've heard of, women feel like they withhold because they don't feel connected. Women connect as well as men with that conversation. And so you need to be nurturing your woman, men, throughout the day with texts, y'all communicating, y'all talking, you're giving her a call. If you guys are away from each other, get on a video chat, normalize flirting, connecting, and having a good time. And even, stimulating each other mentally, physically, and emotionally, and sexually, throughout the day. Like, why not? I mean, this is the whole point of the relationship. And so I just want us to, one, tap into our own emotions, going out of days of being, trying to be cold or stoic, I guess you could call it, or not being tapped in. But we get to say, let me check in with myself. Am I feeling that way? Why am I feeling that way? What happened? What was said? And talk about what other people have done, how that made you feel, what your partner is doing, how that make you feel, what you're thinking, and everything. Like, let's just have open conversation. Talking about everything and nothing is important. That's what I would say about that, sis.
It's distractions. So you had mentioned that just quickly, and you seem really excited today to talk about this conversation. But it is, folks are distracted. That's, first and foremost. And, I always have to go back to the root reason why people are not able to communicate. They are not engaging and they're not feeling connected to their spouses. I often say, a lot of times in different cultures and community ethnic groups, and particularly in the African American culture per se, there's not a lot of uh, there was not a lot of communication that happened in the homes of that particular group of people, which we are a part of that group of people, right? I'm not saying this is all, but I'm saying when you start looking at data, and when you start asking people, how they grew up and if they had conversations around the dinner table about how you're doing, how was your day. So a lot of this comes from this, avoiding, comes from not avoiding, you didn't, I'm sorry. A lot of the communication, well, it is avoiding of emotional conversations, because I'm talking about something with avoiding too, so I got a little mixed up there. Avoiding emotional conversations is because they never had these. I'm not saying it as an excuse, but it does give language and help you to understand why people can communicate and be able to connect emotionally. They don't want, they shy away from this deep emotional connection and anything that's going to cause them to feel raw or cause them to open up. And then you have individuals that were in previous, both men and women, previous relationships where that was taken advantage of, or that was not, they were not safe in those relationships, right? So they were not able to deeply connect. And again, if this is not making excuses, but if you are in this situation or you tend to attract individuals like this, or if you are like this, we may need to start looking at something a little deeper. And sometimes there's a misunderstanding of signals, right? So you don't know what the person needs, and instead of clarifying that, asking clarifying questions, you do the opposite. So that's all I wanted to say about that. But people are just distracted, and in some cases just unaware, unfortunately. I don't know, dad used to say common sense ain't
Absolutely. And
common.
before we go on, girl, listen, before you go to your point, I want to just say this. I know I've said this many times before. I'll probably say it even another time before we get up here today. Understand Choose in the moment when you are having these conversations with your partner and they're expressing how they felt about something. Choose understanding and agreeableness. Choose it. Choose understanding at least, and ideally, if you can, agreeableness. But even if you can't get to the agreeableness, understanding is important. And I made a note here just now: dismissiveness and defensiveness destroys relationships. Defensiveness
Mhm.
and dismissiveness is destructive. So we can't, don't get into, oh, you're right, you, that I didn't mean you to feel this way. Don't, no, 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 no. Oh, this is how you felt. I understand. What can I do to make you feel different? Like next time. Like, if this is the heartbeat of relationships, y'all should give a darn about how your partner feel it rather than
This,
trying to tell them and convince them that's not how they
this is
feel.
adulting.
Okay, go ahead, Trill. Let me,
So can you add deflecting to
adulting
that?
conversation.
Can you add deflecting? You said defensiveness,
Oh, girl,
dismissiveness, and also deflecting,
and
right?
deflecting.
And eh, so I'm going to share, since we're on talking about avoidance, I think it's just right to go and talk about avoiding conflict resolution. It kind of ties into that, but it's expanded, right? So when you're avoiding that conflict resolution, you're bottling up, right? Not addressing things that need to be addressed, not addressing problems. I used to often hear people say, well, we don't argue, we don't have disagreements. And at first I thought something was wrong with me and my husband, because I'm like, we over here always
To be like
disagree.
that. Yep.
I'm like, we always disagree. Like, what's wrong with us? But I realized that that was actually healthy. And we were able to talk about hard things, and we were able to improve on our communication, because we saw that when sometimes when we did talk about hard things, it did get heated. We did go left, we did go right, and we learned how to talk about hard things without judging the other person, without attacking the other person, blaming the other person, so forth and so on. So when you avoid conflict resolution, you are missing out on dealing with the issue at hand, and that problem stays there. So if you're not unhappy, if you're unhappy, if you don't like something, if you're not being satisfied or fulfilled, or you don't like the way your partner's hair look, or how he dressed, whatever it is, you're just not seeing anything, you're just kind of going with the flow. And that going with the flow is going to lead to some division at some point within that relationship. So avoiding conflict, there's also the unproductive conversations, unproductive argument, when you're just focusing on winning rather than resolving. This creates a toxic cycle. I want to win. I want one up on him or her, or I got to prove that they're wrong, or competing in the conversation as well, or listening to just respond and not listening to understand and to validate. Everybody wants to feel heard, everybody wants to be understood, and everybody wants to feel valued. I'm gonna say that again. Everybody, whether you're a man or you're a woman, wants to feel heard, wants to be understood, and wants to feel valued. So when those three things are taken out of the equation, you're going to have a disaster that's going to happen. So more on bottling up. So bottling up refers to tendency to suppress the feelings or concerns instead of addressing them openly. Think about bottling up. You're bottling up. This comes from a variety of reasons. We were talking about, like, what are these things stem from? What happens with this, fear of confrontation? I know a lot of people that fears confrontation for a number of reasons. A lot of it is childhood trauma, adulthood trauma, just not knowing how to communicate without having confrontation and going in a full-blown argument. This is a desire to avoid conflict as well, or uncertainty about how to express feelings effectively. Never learn, never took the time out to learn. So they just kind of bottle up. That's the safety mechanism. That is protection. That's secure, not healthy, but for them that is secure. But this has significant consequences. When we start looking at the consequences, when problems are not addressed in the relationship as they arise, it accumulates. There's a scripture in the Bible says that the small foxes destroy the vine, the little things turn into big things, a little leaven leaves a whole lump. So when you say, oh, it's just small, that's nothing, oh, it's whatever. Yeah, it's whatever until it leads to resentment. It's whatever until it leads to frustration. It's whatever until it leads to bitterness. And over time, these unresolved issues become more
Come
significant. They
on.
become more massive. They turn to minor things, Jill, turn into major conflicts. It could be something so small, start off so small, but now because it's built up over time, it's created a volatile environment where one or both people may eventually explode over time over something so very small. And you know what this leads to? This leads to hurt. This leads to significant pain, hurtful arguments. This leads to emotional distance. This leads to so many things. So we have to be very mindful in avoiding conflict. You may think that is helpful right now, but if you continue to allow it to fester, it is going to eventually destroy. So what do? We have to encourage and practice open communication. Being open, being vulnerable, being honest, being transparent, identifying issues head on, not waiting. I often say, Jill, people are saying sometimes, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. Well, that's what you did wrong. When you saw something, you didn't say something. And that's what you did wrong. So you
Come on.
alluded to earlier using I statements. I feel because of, and as a result, right? I feel overlooked. I feel hurt. I feel misunderstood. Whatever that is, we have to learn how to share. And if you're having a difficult time in that, maybe it's time for you to get some professional help and support so you can learn how to communicate better so we don't lead to unhealthy conflicts leading eventually to a failed relationship.
1,000%. And avoiding that conflict is ultimately going to lead to your unhappiness. Because what happens in
Absolutely.
that moment, what you were saying, like you and your husband used to have this conflict, and you thought was like, oh wow, what's up with us? But what was happening is both of you guys was committed to your needs. Both of you guys were committed to the things that you needed to be fulfilled in that relationship. And so that's a level of self-efficacy and
Mhm.
self-advocating, even if you want to keep it really simple, of you saying, hey, this is what I need in this relationship to make me happy. That's the trigger word everybody wants to use. That's fine. We can use that to have joy, to feel fulfilled, to feel the bubbly things and good and feel like I'm being seen, heard, and understood. This is what I need. And what sometimes if you're coming from a childhood where you didn't receive those things and those things were scarce, you will see that as competition, but that's the wrong thing. Partnership is all about collaboration. So you be like, okay,
Yes.
bet you got your top 3 things that you need to be fulfilled. Cool. Let me go through your 3 things. Next week, can we talk about the top 3 things that I would like to have in order to be fulfilled? We don't have these conversations enough, and a lot of times, this is where it gets. The men always want to, they always talk about, oh, I want the physical and this. And listen, I'm gonna tell you, I not to say, how can I say, I'm a spiritual traditionalist. I believe the word of God. I don't always follow every day. I try to do my best. Sometimes I fall short, but I believe what the word of God says. I try to live that. So with that being said, when the word of God says that as a married couple, a woman should not deny a man, I stand 10 toes down on that. Okay. At the same time, what happens a lot of times is that is one of the top 3 things that a man needs is that physical and sexual relationship to feel fulfilled. And the woman needs that emotional connection, that quality time or whatever. She's not getting what she needs. So in retaliation, which is a bad idea, and I don't endorse
Mhm.
nor support or anything like that, but as a retaliation or try to get attention and try to stand her ground because of lack of communication skills, she then puts the sanction or otherwise, you know what I
On
mean,
her.
barrier, and don't allow the physical stuff to commence, which actually creates more gaps,
Right.
more opportunity for temptation and things like that. And so, but it all
And that's
begins
abuse,
by saying, hey,
honestly.
no, you need what that's what you need. Let me tell you what I need. And let's talk about what can we both do to manage our needs, support and nurture each other's priorities for this relationship to thrive. This is not hard stuff. But I would tell you, even though it's not hard stuff, I did not always know this. I had to have learned this because what I'm realizing, I'm gonna pass my back to my sister for her to finish what she has to say, is that this is really dealing with social intelligence, with communication, and many of us do not have it. A lot of us don't even have emotional intelligence, which to me, emotional intelligence is just being able to regulate your own feelings and emotions, right? But social is now introducing, not only do you need to, and you can not even help other people regulate their feelings and emotion if you can't regulate your own. So first you got to get that emotional. Let me tap and see how I feel, regulate that, respond in a positive, healthy way. But also now when you talk about social intelligence, is now saying, I am going to increase my capacity to say I'm co-responsible for how you feel. You know, somebody told me one time, I was told a time or two that somebody said, I'm not responsible for your feelings. I've heard people say that, and I disagree. If you're in a marriage or if you're in a relationship, somebody tell me they're not responsible for your feelings. Yeah, you are. Like, you are co-responsible for how I feel. You're contributing to that. Now, you don't have to manage my feelings and emotions. However, there should be some type of consideration. That's why we're in a relationship, because you care how I feel. If you don't care how I feel, why are we in a relationship? Maybe I'm talking. Okay, go ahead, Trail.
So I'm glad you said that, because I remember I was telling you. Yeah, I was telling you. I said that's abuse too. When you withhold, when you're punishing, it's like a punishment that you're enforcing on your spouse. So just FYI. I was saying, I recall that time I was telling you that I had an issue. I did have an issue, but it was not my husband's issue. But he still wanted to help me solve the problem, but he would not join in with me and admitting that it was his problem too, which it wasn't, but I wanted him to join in. But I respect that, because although at the time he's like, this is not my problem. Like, I'm not dealing with this. You're dealing with this. So I want to help you deal with this. Essentially, I love you. I care about you. I care that this bothers you. And he did say that. And I want to help you. But for whatever reason, something in me was not satisfied with that at the time. And I really wanted him to connect in a different way and say, okay, I have this problem too. But the mature side of me, and the wise side of me, understood that in that moment, although he did not share the same feelings, he had a joint interest. The joint interest was me feeling better, me being fulfilled, satisfied, or happy in that moment. So he had a joint interest, but he didn't necessarily have the same feeling that I was feeling, if that makes sense. So you have to appreciate that. Yeah. But that's growth.
1,000%.
Yeah, we went back and forth a while. I'm like, no, you need to feel this way.
Be sensitive how they feel. You ain't got to take on their emotions and internalize it, but just say, I understand how you feel, baby. What can I do to support you? So that's all I'm saying. Lastly, we wanted to talk a little bit. I don't know if we talked about poor listening skills. Did you want to speak on that?
I haven't talked about that yet, but you were supposed to talk about fear of vulnerability. You haven't talked about fear of vulnerability and silence yet.
So let's talk about it really quick. So
real quick, yeah, because I talked about bottling up. So that's
about sharing your feelings and emotions. And I know a lot of times we throw around the word, oh, it's not a safe space. However, when there is not a safe space, even as the person who's saying my partner didn't create a safe space for me, it is our responsibility for that individual saying my partner's not creating a safe space, for me to tell my partner that they're not creating a safe space.
I feel unsafe.
My partner what
I feel unsafe.
And stop doing right and say, hey, babe, when you do that, that makes me feel unsafe. And for women especially, but I don't think for men too, I think both of us have one of our top needs is to have the space where we can share our truth about how we feel without being criticized, without being judged, without being whatever. And so if we are fair in that vulnerability, then we need to take responsibility to communicate to our partner in a loving way that what they're doing or not doing, what they're saying or not saying, is making it a little more difficult. And if they did something a little different, it could support us. So that's what I would say. And then in those moments, we just have to gain the courage to share it, and also be careful not to project and think somebody's going to be judging you. Because sometimes it can be our own insecurity, our own shame that we don't want to share things and thinking. And a lot of times, I believe, especially, I'm gonna advocate for the best sides of all of us. Okay, I believe in a marriage, your partner wants to know, even if you're struggling with a life-dominating addiction, something that's embarrassing, something that you've been ashamed of your whole life. Like, your partner should be like your person in your life that be like, listen, I'm gonna help you to overcome this. And if there's not, then we need to have some more conversations about that. And it shouldn't be a criticism. It should be like, oh man, I didn't know you. Like, I'm even thinking about Twitch Boss. I think, I don't know the situation with him. Is a lot of different rumors with the man who he had ended up committing suicide, or unliving, I guess you say. But they were saying that he was on a drug addiction. I don't know if it was true or not, but his wife did not know if that was the case. And to me, you should not be struggling with something like that and your partner not know. even the word of God talks about it's better for two to, to work together, because when one is down, the other can lift the other person up. So don't let go of that shame, and pray too, to ask God to help you to reduce and let go of that shame and be courageous. This person said they're going to commit to you for life, right? So let's hey, do life with me and support me. This is what I'm struggling. Like that's just what it is. So that's the fear of vulnerability. Let me see if there's one anything else. And invisible walls and stuff like that. Okay. So sometimes over time, when we feel like our partner is not responding to our needs, we feel like our partner is neglecting us, or being neglectful, dismissive, defensive, deflecting, all the things, sometimes it can be tempting to build a wall if they're not responding in the way we want. And I want to encourage us, rather than build those walls, let's take the walls down and start saying, hey, could you do this instead? That make me feel a little comfortable, and help check them. And you're going to have to kind of hold them accountable for how they're responding, because sometimes the old habits die hard. And so we have to kind of be patient with one another to say, hey, we're doing the best we can. And sometimes I've even seen people, like, especially if you like tend to be over talkers, sometimes y'all might have to have your phone as the mic. Okay, it's my turn to speak. Let me finish. Let me have 2 to 5 minutes. I've heard people doing that, giving each other a certain amount of length of time to respond, and then the other person not being able to defend, but just saying, hey, I hear you. I understood. This was my takeaway. So find ways to create space for listening. Find ways to create space for understanding. Find ways to create space for vulnerability and safety without judgment, by just setting some basic parameters about how we're going to communicate in this moment. And avoid, which I be so guilty of, the like 10, 15, 20 minute, 30 minute, like State of the Union. Ladies, no State of the Union addresses, okay? 3 to 5 minutes, say your piece, and we're gonna have to wrap it up, okay?
That's long.
Maybe I'm just talking about myself.
Maybe be 60
that
seconds. That's kind of long. 120 minutes.
Dialogue, not monologues.
Not over explaining.
Children,
I heard someone say, children explain, adults inform. So the last one we're going to share is poor listening skills. And in case anybody's interested in knowing what that scripture you were talking about, 2 is better than 1, because they both have something about their return. I can't reward. They both get a return for the reward, or something to that degree. That talks about that in Ecclesiastes 4. I encourage people to go and read that so they can understand the dynamic of 2, the power of 2, right? So poor listening skills, right? So poor listening skills equate to you not being present. And when you're not present, you fail to actively listen. And this can make the individual feel unvalued and unheard. So, for instance, if you're interrupting or dismissing the conversation, that can lead to frustrations and feeling of disrespect. Going a little further of the impact when you're not present, this the conversation is failing at that point, right? So conversation is failing to give your full undivided, when you're failing to give your full undivided attention to your partner, then there is no conversation. They're feeling disrespected, you're feeling disrespected, they're feeling neglected, they're feeling dismissed. All of these things are happening in this moment when you choose not to be present. You on your phone, you looking the other way, you're distracted by this or preoccupied by that. That's really disrespectful, especially when someone is talking to you, and especially if you are having a heated conversation, not so much an argument, but talking about something very important, very significant, very life-changing, and you're just checked out, right? So we don't want to do that. We want to be responsible in our part in this relationship and making sure that we are being fully present in that moment. There are consequences, right? When your partner feels unheard, they feel isolated, they feel frustrated, they feel unwanted. This also creeps into impacting intimacy over time. Intimacy is being connected, being close, emotionally, mentally, physically connected. But if someone is always dismissing you, not being present, not giving you their full undivided attention, zoning out during conversation and la la land somewhere, you're not going to be intimate with that person, right? You're not going to want to do that. So we want to encourage you to actively listen. Think of techniques that you can implement to actively listen. Practice with a friend and let them tell you, like, hey, how well am I at actively listen? Let's practice. And let me say something to you, repeat back to me, and let me see if we can try to resolve that. Maintain eye contact when you're talking to someone. I heard this about men, though. I heard men don't like women to give them eye contact. I don't know, men, let us know. I heard that it's a sign like when you're staring them in the face, it's kind of like it can
Mhm.
be what's the word I'm looking for? A little intimidating. And the person that used this demonstration, I can't remember who said this. Maybe it was John Gottman. He was saying like even men when they go to the bar, they sit together, they sit side by side. They don't sit in front of each other. So I don't know. I'll have to look that up to see if there's some truth behind it. If John Gottman said it, probably is, but I can't remember who said it. Maintain eye contact, nodding, so they can know, okay, I understand. I'm picking up what you're putting down. Again, summarizing what they have said. All this suggests that you created a distraction-free environment. I'm not distracted. I'm fully into you. I'm fully wanting to know what you're saying and things of that nature. Just really quickly on interrupting or dismissing. So this occurs, of course, when you're cutting the person off while they're speaking. You may have heard some of that today only because the mics are a little delayed. So we're going to work on that. But you want to allow the person to fully get their point across without you having to, let me jump in. We don't want to be impatient. We don't want to be eager to respond. A desire to assert, I have a perspective. I have my viewpoint. I have to say, no, you need to be quiet in that moment, right? So dismissing involves downplaying or even negating what the other person is saying, which also can manifest in sarcasm, being sarcastic about what they're saying, mimicking them, minimizing their concerns, are just denying how they feel. All of that is so very hurtful, so very disrespectful, so very insensitive, so very inconsiderate. And we get to learn how to do things better. There are extreme consequences in dismissing and interrupting. And this leads to feeling, again, disrespected, leads to feeling frustrated. And when when your partner feel that their thoughts are not valued, when they don't feel heard, when they don't feel understood, this creates an imbalance and it fosters resentment. It contributes to distance and this, and over time, right? Your communication will continue to reduce over time. You will, trust is what I was going to share earlier where you were talking, because you were saying your partner should feel comfortable coming to you about addiction. But even with this, it leads to a breakdown of intimacy. It leads to a breakdown of trust, and why people are not able to have these conversations, be it dealing with addictions or whatever, is sometimes there is a lack of trust. Sometimes there have been things said in the current relationship that has violated, or there's a breach of trust there. So now we have to go back and we have to build that trust. So what are some strategies for improvement so we won't be interrupting and dismissing? We have to encourage ourselves. You were talking about it just now, Jill, to be regulated, self regulation, taking a pause. I would tell people, like, before you say something, before you respond, ask yourself, is it true? Is it helpful? I can't remember the other thing because it was so long ago, but is it true? Is it helpful? And something else I used to say, because you have to, in that moment, just go through a few questions in your mind before you respond. Before you respond. And I like to say too, like, when your partner says something to you and maybe out the way or whatever, do they love you? Do they have your best interests in mind? Are they trying to hurt you? Is the intent to hurt? Is the intent to attack your character? Right? You have to start asking yourself those questions really quickly because the mind goes so quick. Once they say something, you respond back, things go so quick. So we want to pause before responding, allowing the person to finish speaking, and also validate. We've talked about that before. Validating what they're saying, just acknowledging their feelings, their perspectives, their opinions. You don't have to agree. You don't have to agree with it. But babe, I hear you. That's an interesting point. Hmm. That's an interesting perspective. I never thought about it that way. Do you mind if I share my perspective? Do you mind if I give my 2 cents on what or how I feel about the situation? Right. We've talked about safe spaces. So we want to make sure that we're creating a space where both people feel comfortable and vulnerable enough to share their thoughts without fear, without feeling like they're going to be interrupted, and without feeling like they're going to be dismissed or just shush to the side. Shh. You do kids. Shh. So that's what I have to say about that. About
Really, that was good. That was good. I just want to add one, two, or three things there. One that
one or
was
two or
used as you're
three.
talking.
Jeez.
Yeah, real quick.
Next,
So
next.
disagreeing, what I come to me is be a little disrespectful, especially when you're talking about disagreeing, really even with their opinion and or with their feelings. Because when you disagree, you kind of slide in, and I listen, I'm working on this actively every day. You slide into wanting to be right. And when you tell somebody, I disagree with your subconsciously saying is your position is inaccurate, and here is a more mature, better perspective and position that should be taken. It's called my opinion. Right? And even maybe some facts that you've interpreted to inferred, all the things. I get all my intellects. We got it. Okay. But so be careful about that. It's like Charles saying, rather than saying, try to get that I disagree out of the vocabulary and use alternative languages to work from there. Mature talk about what else can you do? Put away the phone. Let's put away the phones. Maybe you need to put the phone off, cut off the internet. These things are known to be life dominating addictions that many of us have. And so let's make ourselves set ourselves up for success and put those things away so we're not distracted and we can be fully present for that person. So we can go on and on and on. I think we've had a great conversation for our part one, dealing with the communication. We're going to have some takeaways for you guys. And the takeaway is like, what is that one area that we talked about tonight that you need to work on to really be more present and to be a better partner for your current relationship, your next relationship, whatever situation you in between. Like, and you can do this every day with everybody. You don't have to wait for somebody of the opposite sex to practice these skills. Sis, what you got?
No, I was just absolutely agreeing with you. I just finished up the 31-day purge challenge. Matter of fact, today was the last day. The 31st was the last day. And that's exactly what I was saying throughout the 31 days. This is not just for married couple. These conversations are not just for relationships. You get to practice and implement these in all your close, intimate relationships. So I'm glad you did say that, because that's definitely been the conversation that's been had over the last 31 days.
Absolutely. That's good, sis. I want to say this, but I'm kind of hesitant because this is like a topic from one of my upcoming books that I'm working on. But what I'm going to say, y'all, let me try and steal my book title, okay? Which is listening. They probably will. I shouldn't say it's true. Don't say it. Okay, I ain't going to say it.
But I would. I mean, what's the harm? You said it here first, so I mean, it is what you need to write the book.
Come on,
get the book out.
And well, listening is the sixth love language. Listening, the sixth love language. When people don't feel heard, they don't feel love. When people feel heard, seen, and understood, they feel love. So understand that listening is the sixth love language, and I believe it's the love language that is a universal. You know, they say, oh, you got 2 or 3 love languages. Everybody got a love language of the listening. It may be high or low, but it's important because that's when people feel like I matter, and everybody wants to feel like they matter in a relationship. If not, why you in a relationship? For you. Okay, y'all have a good night. Okay,
it may say active listening.
Okay,
active listening is the sixth love language.
Come on, sis, because I'm gonna need you to let people know that you hear them and understood. Okay. Facts. Peace and blessings, y'all. Until next time, we'll be back here same time, same place. Make sure you share this, and we'll drop some links to different sources and things that we have going to keep you empowered and keep you on your journey of really self-development and spiritual development. That's really where all great relationships are birthed, with you. So you do your part, and it's going to be natural for you to connect with somebody who is going to be wanting and able to do the same thing, because that's what's going to, you're going to be contagious. Mm-hmm. Peace and blessings. Have a great day. Bye. Peace.
Bye.